Hey y'all, it's K Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Hello, welcome in. It is another Tuesday, and this is another episode of Peace, Love, and Baseball. I am your host, K Bird Tweets. You can follow me there at K Bird Tweets on the Twitter. And this week's episode is going to be a little different because it is more of a crossover episode with Jake and Adam of the Rambling Redbirds podcast. Now, if you're not a Cardinals fan, this episode is absolutely for you because it has very little to do with the Cardinals, the part of the conversation that I'm going to share with you here. But I asked them if I could share part of this episode as a Peace, Love, and Baseball episode because one of the hosts, Jake, made such a great point in that the stuff they were asking me about is not the kind of stuff that I typically bring up here on my own show on Peace, Love, and Baseball. And it gave me a chance to consider some things maybe a little more deeply than I really had before. So I wanted to share it with y'all because not only do they have a great show and you should check it out, but I felt it articulated some things that are as simple as where my baseball fandom began that I've told many times on other podcasts, but really not on my own, at least not lately and in this fashion. And we have a lot of new listeners lately. So, first of all, welcome to y'all. Thank you for checking this out. As I said, you can follow me on Twitter. And if you're not already doing that, I'm on YouTube, the K Bird Tweets YouTube channel, where you can like, subscribe, comment, join in the conversation. Absolutely love it for all of those things. And of course, we're on Instagram at peace.love.baseball. And our Facebook page is called Peace, Love, and Baseball. You know where to find us wherever you are at. I hope we're there too, except for on TikTok, because internally I am an 87-year-old woman. But your interaction is always greatly appreciated. It really helps spread the word. So if you enjoy this podcast, share it with just one other friend or family member who might enjoy it too. So yeah, you'll hear my baseball fan origin story, as well as Jake and Adam asking me to talk about my experience as a woman in the baseball fan and media space. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When they first talked to me about this and they said, we want to ask you about, your experience as a woman in this male dominated space, I was kind of like, do we have to? I said to my husband, like, oh, they want to ask me about this. I don't really know. I mean, yes, I get it. Like, I'm a girl, if you haven't noticed, but like, I'm not trying to sell myself as a woman in baseball specifically or anything, or any one specific lane in any space. I am just a person who is passionate about something with a unique perspective on it because of my background. And that's really everyone with everything. I think at times representation and inclusion can be hard because a lot of times when we think we are advocating for ourselves or for others who are marginalized, we actually further separate ourselves and each other. And that is a really, really big conversation. So we are not going to get that deep into that. Maybe we can get more into it with maybe sort of like a roundtable discussion because it applies to literally every aspect of life, from education to the workplace to social groups and on and on. But ultimately, my goal is not to point out or weigh on what makes us different, but more of what makes us all the same, and how, in fact, our differences are what makes for the kind of connection that we are wired for and that every single one of us on some level craves as a human being. And a big part of what I ultimately hope to get across, as well as that I always find myself thinking about a lot, is how we as a society have to get better at respectfully disagreeing or acknowledging fault, or maybe not even fault, but just like, this is not for me, or it's not a good fit, without anger, without resentment. Don't need to be rude, don't need to be mean. It's just a waste of energy and negative energy. And at the end of the day, the transfer of energy between us as humans is all we really have. It is the experience that makes us human. And it's funny because I think when I advocate for being respectful and kind, especially in certain contexts, there are certainly people who take that as being soft, right? Or I think I was recently referred to as a participation trophy kind of person. So first of all, let me tell you, anyone who knows me well knows that not not a participation trophy kind of person. And again, that might be a topic for another day. I actually feel like we talked about that once on an episode many moons ago, but more so my point for you here is what I believe is really soft is being so soft and crabby and narcissistic as to think that everything on the internet or every opinion or lifestyle or whatever in general is for you and should be catered to you. That's soft. Like, not everything on the internet is for you. Maybe this podcast or my Twitter feed is not for you, and that is completely fine. But what does anyone get out of responding to things just to be rude or demeaning? For example, and this is a very light example, I made a post about Harrison Bader because he was on the Reds as well. So sorry, Reds fans. I did have a few people that were like, what about him as a Red? But I just made a fun post because we were watching the Mets Cardinals game, and Harrison Bader's a fun character in this game of baseball. And we've all, I shouldn't say we all, many of us have enjoyed watching him play for one reason or another. And he's had very different looks on the Cardinals, the Yankees, and the Mets in the last few seasons. And it's just been fun to like watch his look evolve. So I posted the 3 pictures of him and said, like, what's your favorite era of Harrison Bader? And we got so much fun engagement and people commenting of it, of how they love his long locks or they like the clean shaven. They like seeing him grow the beard out now as a Met, like whatever. So fun. But I got maybe just as many people telling me how terrible of a player he is and about his career 708 OPS or his just below league average career batting average. Like, give me a break. Anyway, the point is that that had nothing to do with my post. And if that's the kind of content that you like to consume, if you're a hard stats kind of person, that is awesome. That can be the way that you fan. But then my content is probably not for you because I like stats and analytics as much as anybody, but I also like the heartbeat stuff and the personalities of the players. And that's clear, very clearly what that content was. And that's who that content was for. And if you're not into that, like that's completely fine. You can move on. You can move on and not comment something mean or degrading. When did I post that Harrison Bader has a top OPS in baseball? Did I post saying he's one of the greatest players in each of these franchises' history? I certainly did not. So, what it really comes down to is those types of posts to me or those types of responses are a cry for attention, and it makes me sad that there are so many people who are not fortunate enough to feel seen and feel heard, that this is the way that they go about it. And again, this is a very low key example. If you're on the internet, you know there are like some really negative, really mean conversations that go on, and this is like not even close to the worst of it. It's just kind of a low key lighthearted example. But I refuse to believe that you have to be rude or mean or polarizing to gain traction. Is it easier? Probably. Is it true to me? Never. It's the furthest from it. So I will never understand it other than as a cry for attention, and that know that if you have experienced this, it says absolutely nothing about you. In this case, it says nothing about me and my content, and everything about whatever this person is going through on a completely different level that you or I cannot help them with. And I am fortunate enough to feel secure in that. And you'll hear more about why in today's episode, which is why I'm on this soapbox right now. But I I think when we create the kind of security for each other by simply appreciating the human experience, being respectful of those who have differences in opinions, whether it comes to your baseball team or even religion and politics, if you cannot be respectful while sharing your opinion, then it's not a respectful opinion. And that should be a gut check for you to sit with and question why you feel the need to share it in that way. Okay. Wow. Thank you for coming to my pre TED Talk TED Talk. I just needed to get some of that out because it is great to have more listeners and more engagement, but it's tough when I want nothing more than to include anyone who wants to be a part of our engagement and conversation and to be very inclusive of all of the ways of being a sports fan. But when it comes right down to it, you got to be a decent, respectful human. And that's really the only rule that we have here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. That's the only way we are not for you if you're going to be a big meanie. So when I thought more about why I don't love highlighting the fact that I'm a woman, I came to think that it's because when it really comes down to it, I realize the immense privilege that I do have by being someone who is comfortable in my own skin, and such a huge reason for that is because of the environment that I was raised in and the people that I have been fortunate enough to continue to have close relationships with into adulthood, and wisdom that was embedded into the fiber of my being long before I ever realized what it was and why it is so important to simply see every person as a person and treat each other with respect. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with Jake and Adam at Rambling Redbirds, a lot of which is about just that from a certain angle. And thank you again to them for inviting me on and opening me up to this kind of conversation. So please check out their show in my show notes and find them on social media as well. I will drop their handles in the show notes. Now let's get to it.
So Kelsey, let's get a little bit into you and yourself and your personal history in terms of being on air and being a podcasting guru. And where did your Cardinal fandom start whenever you first started getting into baseball? And who was your favorite player growing up and all of that kind of jazz?
Yeah, so I have been watching Cardinal baseball on the reg for as long as I can remember. My grandpa actually worked at Sportsman's Park in St. Louis in the 40s. And so my grandparents were from St. Louis. My dad spent part of his childhood there. And I actually grew up in central Illinois, right in between Chicago and St. Louis, like almost equal distance between both. So my mom's whole family is diehard Cubs fans. My dad's whole family is diehard Cardinals fans. Fortunately, I made the right choice growing up to stick with the Cardinals, and I don't know exactly what it was that pulled me into the game because I have never played baseball. I've actually never played a ball sport a day in my life, except for, recreationally and for fun. But I liked watching my brother play baseball growing up, and I got into the strategy and the analytics of the game. I mean, as early as like 9-10 years old. And when I think it was the year I was 10 is when Albert Pujols came up and joined the team. So having that excitement around a player and having, one of the best players of all time on my TV regularly is certainly something that initially drew me in. But Matt Morris was my first favorite player. And I was always really drawn to the pitchers. Again, I think because of the strategy. And I loved listening to the breakdown of the color analyst and the play-by-play. And I've always been a very audio-driven person. And I certainly didn't realize that as a kid, but that's a really big part of what drew me into it was, listening to back in my day, Dan McLaughlin and Al Hrabowski on the call. And yeah, I kept my own scorebook. I don't think I knew that I could like get an actual scorebook. So I saw people keeping the stats and like keeping the scorebooks at my brother's baseball games. So I just decided to like make my own version of a scorebook. It was not a real scorebook. It was nothing correct or in that sense or official. But my little 10-year-old self taught myself how to use Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel and made my own scorebook. And I did that religiously for probably like the 3 or 4 summers until I was, 15 or 16 years old and I had to do stupid things like actually get a summer job. But yeah, I've just always been super into it. I got to go to games in the summers growing up as a kid. We go down to visit some of my dad's family and sit up in the nosebleeds at Busch Stadium in the hot July weather. And I just always got really attached to certain players and following their stories. And I mean, ever since, it's always stuck with me into adulthood. And, for the majority of my adulthood, I have actually lived about a half a mile from Wrigley Field in Chicago, but I still proudly wear my Cardinal red anywhere and everywhere that I go.
It's terrific. Everything you said, just like emotionally in me, is like that's terrific, and like it all spoke to me so much when you were talking about like making score or keeping score and making your own little score books and things of that nature. Like that. That's just I felt that on such a personal level. I love that. That's terrific. Adam, go ahead.
I did want to. I had a little follow up question. Where in Central Illinois? Because that's exactly where I'm from as well.
Oh, yeah. I grew up in Washington, right outside of Peoria.
I grew up in Dunlap, right outside of Peoria.
Amazing. I still have a
Yep.
lot of great friends in Dunlap. Actually, one of my friends who I went to opening day with, we're now in our third year strong of attending opening day together. He lives in Dunlap and his kids go to school there.
Oh, that's fun. It's a fun little. That's how I got into Cardinals with the Peoria Chiefs and all that.
Yes,
So,
exactly. You know exactly how it is there. And it's
Mhm.
right. I mean, you are right in the center of, everybody you meet is either a diehard Cubs fan or a diehard Cardinals fan. And the rivalry
Absolutely.
is alive and well. It's a lot of fun.
I proudly hail from Alton, Illinois, home of the world's most haunted city in America, or so it claims to be. But right off the river of the Mississippi, and right where the Illinois and the Missouri River, form the confluence, is what they call it, and it becomes the Mississippi River. And so I live right there, 45 minutes outside of the city. So when you talk about growing up and listening to Danny Mag and Al Herbosky on the call every night, or listening to Jack Buck and Mike Shannon, or even further now into John Rooney and Ricky Horton, like I love it, absolutely. My summers were not complete unless I was watching or listening to Cardinals baseball every single night. And so when I ask our guests to come on and kind of speak to where that all originated, really it's just my inner child, kind of like, did you experience the same immersive experience that I did growing up as a child, to where it's like I really didn't know any other way than this way, that have it, like you referenced your grandparents working at Sportsman Park, and my father passing away at such a young age, but thankfully that was one of the few things that he imparted on me, was the love for Cardinal baseball, and especially with my grandfather, who's now in declining health as well. But that was what we did. We talked ball. I would have my games in the summer, and they would all come and watch, and so, just like you said, just an immersive experience, and it really just consumes your life to a point where you really can't imagine your life without without the Cardinals in it.
Right. Yeah. And it's such an incredible shared experience from generation to generation. In 2022, my dad and I went to a Cardinals game a couple days after my birthday and a couple days before his birthday, to celebrate our birthdays. And we got to see Albert Pujols hit 689 and 690. And it was just so crazy to be like, here we are, like 20 years later, experiencing something that me as a child, who ever thought that we would be here seeing Albert Pujols hit home runs in Busch Stadium in a Cardinal uniform again. So yeah, it transcends time, it transcends generations, and it is really cool to hear about other people and just connect with other people from so many different places and walks of life who had such an immersive shared experience, just like you said.
For sure. And so, with it being baseball specifically, let's get a little bit into the weeds. So, baseball being a mostly fully male dominated sport, what has it been like for you as a woman? And your deep immersive love for baseball, what's that kind of dynamic been within baseball, and kind of that experience, and kind of would you almost characterize it as like having to hold your own to prove to others that, like, yeah, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I don't know baseball? Like, how often do you get mansplained to about the game, and how often is it like so hard to not roll your eyes at that experience?
That the word, I'm glad you used the word, or to prove, because I think that's something that, I don't know. I mean, my experience is not unique in that way, but in some ways I think it is. And I guess I'll start here. I don't necessarily love harping on this, because I like to think that the least interesting thing about my opinions on the game that we love is that I am a woman. But I have learned in adulthood and in being a part of this space, as you mentioned, the importance of representation. And I personally am far less marginalized than so many others in this country and even in this particular lane. But, back to knowing how Danny Mac and Al were my very favorite people to watch and hear on TV for a good decade of my childhood, I do think about it now that if I had seen women in those professions growing up, it very well may have changed the trajectory of what I pursued in college and so on. So that's one thing that I've just realized over the last few years of really getting involved in this way. And that being said, I am very fortunate to have always been surrounded by people in my life who allowed and encouraged my passion for anything and everything. My parents or my family members and my friends never thought that it was weird or told me oh, that's weird. You like baseball. You don't even play baseball, or girls can't even play baseball. I literally never heard that growing up. So that's something that I know is very real. But for me, I just, especially during those really important developmental years, I was so fortunate to not hear things like that. And even more importantly, they just treated me as if my opinion mattered as much as anyone else's, and that I deserve to be heard, and that we all deserve that same respect and appreciation, regardless of gender, race, socioeconomic status, and so on. So to be honest, I have never really questioned that I belong in this space or wherever I want to be, because I am very fortunate to have been surrounded by those closest to me who have validated not just my worthiness, but the value of human connection and communication and the shared experience that we've been talking about, and curiosity, and how we all add value to each other's lives through connection and communication. So I think it comes back to the human experience at the end of the day.
Sure.
But I did want to take this opportunity, guys, to share about when things are said to me like, well, you talk about baseball just as well as the men. Because honestly, I've heard stuff like that. Probably more than, there's always the guys who are going to come in and try to mansplain, as you said. But this is something that's well-intended, right? I know people who say things like this, they mean well, but it is received to me as a sort of insult.
It's kind of backhanded because
I know they don't mean it that way, but I guess think about it this way. I would never consider that I bring anything less because I'm not a man, first of all, but it would be the same as when I have run companies and what if someone came up and said to me, well, you're leading this company as well as a man could, as if I am any less of a leader or a decision maker because I am a woman. Now, I know that there are those who still have that mindset, and I'm, not here to argue that or argue with those people, because if that's your mindset, I have nothing to prove to you, as you said. I am who I am. And as I mentioned, I never played baseball. In fact, I've never played a ball sport, but I am a personal trainer. I'm a nutritionist. I am an expert in functional movement. I have worked as a professional in the entertainment industry, and professional sports is entertainment. So that's my perspective, and I'm not trying to provide any other perspective than the one that I have. As I mentioned, I've run businesses, and I have a great interest in the business of sports, and I've been watching baseball for 160 plus days a year for 25 years. So that's my personal perspective and experience that I bring to the conversation, and I'm not trying to pretend or prove that I know anything more than I do about anything. So if you don't like my opinion because I'm a woman, or because I'm a Cardinals fan, or because I have red hair and you don't like redheads, that's fine by me. I'm here for the good vibes, the respectful debate, and the engaging conversation with everyone who wants to be a part of it, because we all have something to add to the conversation. And I'm glad that we seem to be continuously moving forward in most spaces these days to create more of a world where everybody feels like they can respectfully be a part of any conversation that they want to be a part of.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
but I hope
you did a fantastic job. I just wanted to be able to give you that platform to kind of speak to that, especially because I know sometimes, especially being on my own show, I don't want to talk like I got a big ass head or anything here, but I know it's hard because sometimes whenever you're in your own space that you don't really speak to that, you kind of think about other things. So I know that whenever you you come on to a different show that like it just gives you the opportunity to talk about different things. And especially I just wanted to highlight the fact that like, you know, Kim Ng, who was running the Marlins there for a couple years, and the Giants, who have a young female instructor who's at the major league level, and just women in general are continuously, you know, fighting to break that glass ceiling that kind of exists in baseball. And the fact that, you know, you spoke to, you know, having more female representation and leading to the next generation of female fans and things of that nature. And who knows, maybe one day the first female, you know, major league ball player. I know that, you know, MLB The Show just recently this year came out with, you know, females in their game, and they have the storyline about Toni Stone, who was the first female player in the Negro Leagues, and you know, so just kind of like you said, continuing to perpetuate forward and kind of talking about breaking through that glass ceiling that kind of continues to exist, and I want to make sure that I phrase it properly so that way none of the listeners to this podcast think that I'm trying to like pin you in a corner and be like, you're just a woman, you don't know nothing about no baseball, nothing like that. It's like, I want you to be able to speak from your heart and kind of give your perspective unabated, so that way people can you know, get an actual sense that like, you know, maybe the people that listen and who kind of have made women an afterthought kind of think through that and are kind of like, well, maybe she has a point, you know, whereas it's in the past, it's just been kind of like, woman, shake it off, whatever, she says what she says, I'm a man, I know I'm right, that kind of thing. And like you said, that exists and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm kind of just like, I have, if you're not going to hear me, you're not going to hear me, but I'm here, and all the people with different opinions are here. So, you know, if I'm here to converse and have fun, and like I said, have fun, respectful debate with whoever wants to. And I think as long as your intention is to be yourself, like, you really can't go wrong. And it is you have to, you know, recognize that yes, I am a woman, and that makes me different than the majority in this scenario. But at the end of the day, like, I like to highlight, and one of my goals of my podcast is to highlight all of the things that make us much more the same than different. And I think that's something that as a society we need all the time.
Absolutely. You can follow Kelsey at KBirdTweets on Twitter. You can also follow her podcast. When you go to her link, it's Peace, Love, and Baseball. She also has the Babes podcast, and as well as Bourbon and Baseball podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again in a couple weeks. Keep rambling on, and let's keep rooting for them Birds.